My dear, some stories feel like a slap to the soul, especially when they come dressed in betrayal by those we never expected. And I paid for everything, then my son's mother-in-law took my place on the trip. Well, that one? It makes my old heart ache and burn all at once. Before we settle in, would you be kind enough to click subscribe? Leave me a comment when the story ends, and share it with someone who's been overlooked after giving too much. Because sometimes the ones who give the most are the first to be forgotten. Let me say this before we begin. Love without respect is just manipulation with a pretty bow. Keep that in your pocket. The airport gate was only 30 feet away, but I couldn't take another step. Not after what I saw. There she was, Darlene McCarty, grinning like a possum in pearls, sliding her wheeled luggage behind my son and his wife. My ticket, my trip, my dream, all gifted away to someone who'd done nothing but compete with me since the wedding day. They didn't see me, or maybe they did, and just kept walking. My boarding pass was paid for, my suitcase packed. I'd even arranged the hotel upgrades, little treats tucked into the itinerary. It was supposed to be a family trip. My family. My chance to bond with the daughter-in-law who never quite warmed to me. And just like that, I'd been replaced, and no one had the decency to tell me. I stood frozen, clenching the handle of my suitcase until my knuckles turned white, wondering when exactly I became invisible to the people I gave everything to, and if I'd ever meant anything to them at all. It started with a phone call I almost missed. I was up to my elbows in pie dough, humming along to an old Nat King Cole tune when my cell buzzed against the flour-speckled countertop. The screen lit up with my daughter-in-law's name, Aubrey. That was rare. "Hey there, sugar," I answered, wiping my hands on my apron. "Everything all right?" Aubrey's voice was chipper, too chipper. "Hi, Mrs. Whitford. Just wanted to check in about the vacation details. We are so grateful you took care of everything. Seriously, you didn't have to." "Oh, it's nothing," I interrupted gently. "It means the world to have this time with y'all. I'm just glad we could pull it together." A pause. A shuffle. Then a low, uneasy laugh. "Yeah, about that. I wanted to let you know Darlene's coming instead. She really needed the break, and it just made more sense. Hope you understand." Silence. Not even a sorry. I remember the sound the rolling pin made when I dropped it. Hollow. Like something inside me cracked a little too. You know, my dear, when you've raised a child, really raised them, from their scraped knees to their first heartbreak, you don't expect to be treated like a piece of luggage they forgot to check in. My boy, Caleb, came into this world with a shock of black curls and eyes that always seemed to be searching for something. After his daddy passed, cancer took Harold fast, and when Caleb was just 15, I did everything I could to soften the blow. I worked double shifts at the library and baked his favorite cornbread every Sunday just to keep the house from feeling empty. Caleb was bright, earned a scholarship, studied engineering, and made his mama proud. And then came Aubrey. She was polite at first, polished, the kind of girl who wore pearls to brunch and never once let her mascara run. I wanted to love her, truly I did. But from the start, there was a thin layer of frost between us. She'd say things like, "Well, my real mom does it this way," or "Darlene says you're so traditional." Still, I bit my tongue and smiled. I brought casseroles when they moved in together, paid for parts of their wedding when Darlene balked at the price of the venue, and when Aubrey's voice trembled at the rehearsal dinner because the floral arrangements were off by 2 shades. I was the one who calmed her down. It was after the wedding that things began to shift. They moved further out, closer to Darlene, they said, because she was getting older. Mercy me, I'm older too. But I swallowed that lump in my throat and kept showing up. Birthdays, cookouts, holidays. I bought the crib when the baby came. I stocked their pantry when Caleb was laid off for a spell. Still, every time I tried to reach out, there was Darlene. Always one step ahead. She had a way of making herself central, like she was the queen bee and the rest of us were just buzzing around her for permission. She volunteered at the same church where Aubrey sang, got her hair done at the same salon, even found ways to join their vacations. But this trip? This one was mine. I'd spent months planning it. Booked the mountain cabin, organized the hikes, even set aside a little wine and cheese night by the fire pit. It was supposed to be a gift, something special before the baby turned 2 and life got even busier. I remember telling Caleb over dinner one night, "I've always wanted to see those Carolina peaks with y'all. Thought we could make a memory out of it." He nodded, distracted by his phone, and murmured, "Sure, Mom. Sounds good." I didn't see it coming. Not even a hint. The day before the flight, I texted to confirm the details, and got no reply. Then that pedo call from Aubrey. The swift unraveling of what I thought was a bond.
No argument.
No warning. Just a cheerful little betrayal wrapped in sweet southern sugar. The next morning I stared at my packed suitcase like it had betrayed me too. There it sat, neat as a pin, with my folded scarves, my rose-scented lotion, the book I'd been saving for the porch swing evenings. I'd even packed extra mittens for Aubrey, remembering how she always complained about cold fingers. Muffin, my old tabby, curled around my legs, sensing something was off. I crouched beside her, brushing her soft fur as I whispered, "I guess it's just you and me, girl." I spent the day in a daze, pacing from window to window, replaying the call, the nerve. Mercy me, even now I feel the sting in my throat. How do you explain being cut out of your own plans without so much as a tear shed? By dusk, I knew I couldn't sit still anymore. I needed answers, or at the very least a sliver of dignity. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove across town to their house without calling first. Their driveway was full, Caleb's truck, Aubrey's SUV, and there at the end, Darlene's shiny little sedan. The porch light was on. Laughter floated through the cracked kitchen window, brittle and sharp. I stood at the door for a moment, heart rattling in my chest. Then I knocked. It was Caleb who answered. He blinked, surprised. "Mom." I tried to smile, but it came out lopsided. "Just thought I'd stop by. Didn't hear back about the trip." Behind him I saw them. Aubrey, holding the baby, and Darlene, perched at the kitchen island like a smug little queen. She waved. "Oh," Darlene called. "Eya, I didn't know you were coming." Of course she didn't. She wasn't supposed to be going. "I thought I was going," I said, voice steady but soft. The room went still. Caleb rubbed the back of his neck. Aubrey shifted the baby from one hip to the other. "Well," he began, "we just figured it made more sense this way. Darlene already had the time off. And you know how she and Aubrey—" "I bought the tickets," I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended. "I arranged the rooms. I planned this for us." Aubrey's eyes darted away. Darlene smiled, sickeningly sweet. "Oh, Ellie, don't take it personally. I mean, you're more of a homebody, right? I told Aubrey I'd be happy to tag along so you could relax. It just made sense." Made sense. I felt the blood drain from my face. Caleb looked like he wanted to disappear into the hardwood floor. Not once did he correct her. Not once did he say, "Mom planned this." "I see," I whispered. "Well, y'all have a good trip then." I turned and left before my tears could betray me. I made it to the car before they fell. My dear, it's one thing to be left out. It's another thing entirely to be replaced. The drive home blurred in streaks of tail lights and street lamps, every corner of my chest aching like it had been hollowed out with a spoon. I didn't turn on the radio. Didn't speak. Just kept whispering the same question over and over. How could he let this happen? I parked in the driveway, but I didn't go inside right away. I sat there, staring out at the roses I'd planted last spring, now wilting, half swallowed by summer's heat. They looked how I felt. Forgotten. That night, sleep came in fits and starts. I kept hearing Darlene's voice, bright and patronizing. "You're more of a homebody, right?" Like I was some doddering old relic who couldn't keep up with her own son's life. The next morning, I opened my email to cancel my flight. The refund was partial. Of course it was. The hotel didn't offer any refund at all. The sweet little fire pit package? Gone. The extra wine I had shipped ahead? Well, I reckoned Darlene would enjoy it just fine. I didn't hear from Caleb for 2 days. Then a message popped up, a simple text. "Hey Mom. Hope you're okay. We'll bring you back a souvenir. Love you." A souvenir. Like I'd missed a church raffle instead of a week-long trip meant to bind the frayed threads of our family. My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed, erased, typed again. Finally, I just put the phone down. That same day, I stopped by the church office. Mrs. Garner, the secretary, looked up in surprise. "Ellie, aren't you supposed to be out of town?" I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Change of plans. I volunteered for the food drive that weekend. Took over the flower arrangements for Sunday service. Baked 2 pecan pies and 3 casseroles for folks who needed them more than I did. Busy hands, my dear, are a balm when the heart won't quit hurting. But the ache? It lingers in the quiet. One evening, I was flipping through the vacation album I'd made on my tablet. Digital placeholders for memories that would never be mine. There they were. A new photo uploaded. The mountains. My cabin. Aubrey cradling the baby in a rocking chair. And beside her, Darlene, beaming like she'd won a prize she didn't earn. And Caleb, standing behind them, one hand on Darlene's shoulder. Not once had they mentioned me in the captions. Not once did they even tag me. That night, I deleted the photo album. Not in anger, but in mourning. Because sometimes, my dear, it's not just a place they take from you. It's the space you held in their lives. Mercy. If you've ever had your name scrubbed from a memory you helped build, then you know the feeling. It's like walking into a room that used to belong to you, only to find the furniture rearranged and your scent wiped clean from the cushions. 3 days after they returned, Caleb stopped by, unannounced. I heard his truck before I saw it. That familiar rattle in the engine he never bothered to fix. Muffin perked up from her perch on the windowsill, and I wiped my hands on my apron, unsure whether to open the door at all. He stood there with a sheepish grin, holding a paper bag. "Hey, Mom," he said like everything was fine. "Brought you some of those chocolates you like from the lodge gift shop." I took the bag but didn't invite him in. We stood on the porch, late summer sun casting long shadows between us. He shifted from foot to foot, eyes darting like a guilty schoolboy. "It was nice," he said after a beat. "The trip." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm sure it was. Darlene helped out a lot with the baby." My breath hitched. So did I. For 2 years. Without needing a seat on a vacation to earn it. He sighed. "Aubrey thought it'd be easier with her mom there. Said it was too much pressure having you around sometimes." Pressure. As if my presence was a burden. As if love expressed in casseroles and quiet generosity was somehow suffocating. My voice came low and even. "And you agreed?" He looked down. "I didn't want to upset her." "Then you didn't mind upsetting me." The truth landed heavy between us. I could see it then, the quiet machinery behind it all. The way Aubrey curated her world with precision. The roles assigned, the hierarchy sealed. Darlene as the co-pilot. Me as the relic. Not inconvenient, exactly, just unnecessary. Caleb finally met my eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom." But it didn't feel like an apology. It felt like a concession. Before he left, he reached for a hug. I let him, but I didn't hold him long. Later that night, I found the card tucked inside the chocolate bag. A glossy postcard from the lodge, with the words written in Darlene's unmistakable, looping cursive. "Such a magical trip. We missed you, but it just worked out perfectly." No signature from Caleb. None from Aubrey. Just her. I tucked that card into the back of my prayer journal. Not to remember it, but to remind myself. Some folks will step over your kindness just to warm their feet. And even the people you love most can let them. The wind turned sharp that week. The kind of chill that slips down your collar and reminds you that fall's coming whether you're ready or not. I kept busy. Painted the guest room a soft robin's egg blue. Reorganized my recipe cards. Made a double batch of apple butter to bring to the church bake sale. But grief, my dear, grief don't mind your chores. It curls itself into the quiet moments. The way your fork scrapes an empty plate. The sound of only one mug clinking in the sink. The silence after a phone call that should have come but didn't. Then came Sunday. I walked into church like I had every week for 30 years, hat pinned just right, Bible tucked under my arm. I made it as far as the second pew before I saw them. Caleb, Aubrey, Darlene, all sitting together, baby on her lap, Aubrey laughing at something Darlene whispered in her ear. The kind of laugh that spills easy when you believe the world has shaped itself around you. There was no room beside them. There wasn't supposed to be. I turned, walked out before the hymn began. But mercy me, I didn't cry until I got to my car. And I didn't scream. Not until I pulled into the garage and let the door rattle shut behind me. I slapped the steering wheel. Hard. Again. Again. Muffin yelled from the window above, tail puffed and watching with wide eyes. How dare they? I whispered, breath hitching. How dare they? I had carried that boy through fevered nights, scraped pennies to keep his lights on through college. I had sat by his hospital bed when his appendix nearly ruptured at 19. I had held him when he didn't get that first job, when his first engagement fell apart. I had poured every drop of myself into loving him, and now I was just excess. Uninvited. Edited out. That night I did something I never thought I'd do. I pulled out a box from the closet, one filled with old photographs, handmade cards, dried macaroni art from kindergarten. I sat on the floor flipping through memories that felt more like myths now. Then I found it, a crayon drawing, Caleb's name scrawled across the bottom, stick figures with curly hair and smiles. In the corner he'd written, "Me and Mom on the mountain. I'll take her there one day." I pressed it to my chest and wept. Not for what had been taken from me, but for what I'd believed would never be. Sometimes, the breaking point doesn't look like shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it's just a quiet goodbye, whispered to the version of someone you thought would never let you down. A few days passed like molasses, slow, sticky, hard to stomach. I didn't answer the phone when Caleb called. Twice. I couldn't. Because, my dear, there's a kind of silence we need, not out of spite, but survival. That Wednesday, I got a knock on the door just before supper. It wasn't Caleb. It was Aubrey. I opened the screen door, but didn't invite her in. She stood there, tight smile, hair done up like she'd come from one of those boutiques that charge more for coffee than I pay for a whole pie. "Hi, Mrs. Whitford," she said, holding a small tin. "We brought you some of the cookies from that mountain bakery. The ones you liked." I looked at the tin, then at her. Those were for the trip I was supposed to be on. Her smile faltered. I didn't know things would get so." She paused. "It felt easier with my mom there. You have such a presence, you know?" Caleb didn't want tension. Tension. I nearly laughed. "My presence," I said slowly, "paid for the trip. My presence picked the dates to work around your schedule, planned the meals, called the airline twice when they changed your seats." "I know," she said quickly. "We're really grateful." "No, you're not," I cut in. "Because if you were, you would have looked me in the eye and told me before you replaced me." She stood quiet.
No excuse.
No real apology. I set the cookie tin on the porch railing. "I don't want your leftovers, Aubrey," I said softly, not unkindly. "And I surely don't want pity masked as pastries." Her face flushed. She opened her mouth to speak but closed it again. Then, after a long breath, she said, "I didn't mean for it to hurt you like this." "Intentions," I whispered, "don't stitch up wounds." She left then, shoulders stiff, heels clicking down my walkway like punctuation marks on a sentence I never got to finish. I didn't cry this time. I was too tired. Tired of bending myself small to fit into a space that had no room for me. Tired of waiting for scraps of love from people I'd fed whole meals of grace to. And that's when the shift happened. Not out of vengeance. Not out of anger. But out of clarity. I reached for my journal that night, the old one with rose-printed pages and ribbon binding. And I wrote. Tonight I closed the door. Not to punish them, but to protect what's left of me. Because trust once shattered doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just steps away and doesn't come back. There's a quiet that settles over a house when the people you love most go silent, and you stop chasing after their echoes. That's how it felt in the weeks that followed. Like the world kept turning, but my corner of it sat still, caught in an old familiar hush. I stopped going by their house. Stopped calling. Even at church. I chose a pew further back near the aisle. Easy to leave. Easier to go unnoticed. They didn't call again. Not Caleb. Not Aubrey. Not even a scribbled card from Darlene, though I reckon she'd chalk that up to giving space. But mercy me, space can feel a lot like exile when no one's checking if you're breathing on the other end. The neighbors stopped asking after them. Mrs. Langley across the street tried once, brought over a pumpkin loaf and a gentle, "Everything all right, hon?" But I just smiled and said, "Time has a way of sorting things." I kept busy as best I could. Quilting on Wednesdays, Bible study Thursdays, Coffee with Ida May on Fridays. But the ache stayed. Less like a wound, more like a hollow. That soft cave in your chest where hope used to live. And at night. Lord, the nights. I'd catch myself imagining what might have been. My hand brushing the baby's curls in that mountain air. Laughing with Caleb by the fire. Watching Aubrey warm to me in ways she never had before. Instead, I lay in bed, listening to the wind tap against the windows, Muffin curled against my side. Both of us too quiet for our own good. Some evenings I'd sit at the kitchen table and stare at the postcard from the lodge. Still tucked inside my prayer journal like a thorn I wouldn't pluck. We missed you. Just worked out perfectly. There are words that bruise deeper than any slap. That line, it was one of them. And here's the part that hurts most, my dear. I started to believe it. Maybe I was too much. Too old. Too present. Maybe they were happier without me. That's what silence does. It creeps in through the cracks and starts rewriting the truth you once knew. But some part of me, the steel in my bones, the soft thunder of my mama's voice in my memories, refused to let that be the final chapter. I wasn't sure when, but I knew eventually I'd have to speak. Not for them, but for me. There's a point, my dear, when even the softest heart begins to harden, not out of spite but preservation. The days folded into each other like pages unread. I stopped checking my phone after supper. The texts had dried up anyway, and with them my appetite for hope. Instead, I began pulling back into myself. Journaling more. Cooking less. Even my roses, once so carefully tended, grew wild and lean, climbing toward a sky I couldn't bear to look at too long. I kept wondering, was it me? Had I hovered too much? Loved too loudly? Expected too many thank yous that never came? One evening I found myself at the attic hatch, drawn there like some part of me needed to revisit where I came from to understand who I was now. I pulled down the creaky ladder and climbed into the warm dust of memory. Boxes. Dozens of them. Labeled in my handwriting. Caleb. Elementary. Caleb high school track. Family Christmas. 1998. Harold's letters. I opened the last one. Inside were yellowing envelopes, tied in a silk ribbon I hadn't untied in years. Harold's words, his gentle looping script, carried more comfort than anything I'd felt in months. You're the heartbeat of this home, Ellie. Don't ever forget that, no matter who forgets you first. I pressed the paper to my lips, tears slipping silent down my cheeks. Downstairs, Muffin let out a soft mew. The wind picked up, rustling the old oak outside like it, too, remembered things the world had chosen to forget. That night, I lit a candle, sat in the rocker by the front window and stared out into the velvet dark, letting Harold's words replay in my mind. And I realized something. I had made space for everyone else all my life, in my house, in my heart, in my plans. But I'd never carved a space just for me. Maybe it was time. Time to stop hoping for the doorbell. Time to stop reaching for the phone. Time to gather up the pieces and stitch something new. Not in bitterness. Not in revenge. But in reclamation. Because even if they never apologized, even if Caleb never came back with the truth, I was still here. And I wasn't done yet. It was a Tuesday morning. The kind with light so golden it felt like the Lord had dipped the sky in honey. I was in the garden, gloves on, hands deep in the dirt. Replanting. Not just roses, mind you, something new. Something wild and untamed. Bee balm, lavender, black-eyed Susans. Flowers that didn't need constant tending to bloom. I was just brushing off my knees when I heard the sound of tires on gravel. Slow. Hesitant. I stood, squinting into the sun. It was Caleb. Alone. He parked and sat there a moment, gripping the wheel like it might run off without him. When he finally stepped out, I saw something different in his eyes. Not just guilt. Grief. He held a brown envelope in one hand, and something else in the other, a frame. "Hey, Mama," he said, his voice thin and cracked around the edges. I nodded, lips pressed tight. Didn't speak. He held out the envelope. "I need you to read this. When you're ready." I took it, heart thudding. Then he handed me the frame. It was the crayon drawing, the one I thought had been lost years ago. The mountain. The little stick boy. The words I knew by heart. Me and Mom on the mountain. I'll take her there one day. "I found it," he said softly. In your old photo box after I left last time. I don't know why I looked, but it stopped me in my tracks. I glanced down at it, fingers trembling. I've been selfish, he continued. Scared to upset the balance with Aubrey. Scared to say what needed saying. But I let you down. Worse, I made you feel small. And you've never been anything but the reason I'm standing. I couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. I don't expect forgiveness overnight, he added. But I wanted to start with the truth. I nodded, slow and unsure, and turned to the envelope. Inside, a handwritten letter. 3 pages long. And 2 plane tickets. Not to the same lodge. A new one. Cabin just for us. I booked this for October, he said. Just you and me, Mama. If you want. He started to turn back toward his truck, but I reached out and touched his shoulder. I'll read it, I said. And I'll think on the rest. He looked relieved, wrecked, and grateful. As he pulled away, I looked down at the drawing again. And for the first time in a long while, I let hope back in. Not all the way. Not yet. But just enough to feel the crack where light might enter. I read his letter that night under the soft light of my bedside lamp. Harold's framed photo watching from across the room like he knew this moment would come. Caleb's handwriting hadn't changed much. Still wide and rushed like he was trying to catch his own thoughts before they got away. But the words? Lord, the words were different. He told me about the pressure he'd felt, not just from Aubrey but from himself. The guilt of being pulled between 2 women. The fear of saying the wrong thing. The cowardice of letting silence do the heavy lifting. He confessed that it was easier to let Darlene in because she demanded it. And easier to let me go. Because I never did. And then this line, scribbled at the bottom of the 2nd page. I thought you'd always be there, Mom. I didn't realize you could leave too. Even without walking out the door. I closed my eyes then, pressing the page to my chest. He'd felt it. The distance I built like a quiet wall. Not out of vengeance, but preservation. And now, maybe he was willing to climb it, brick by quiet brick. The days that followed felt like early spring, still chilly, but with something soft blooming beneath. Caleb called again. And again. Each time, we talked a little longer. About nothing sometimes. The garden. The baby's new words. A new job offer he was considering. But I noticed the way he lingered at the end of each call, like he didn't want to hang up first anymore. Aubrey sent a card. Handwritten. Awkward, yes. But hers. I didn't realize how much space I took up. I see it now. I'm sorry I made you feel unwelcome in your own family. It wasn't a ribbon-wrapped apology, but it was a beginning. And slowly, like watching dawn break over foggy hills, something in me began to thaw. I started making a list for the trip. Just a simple one. Sunscreen. Journal. Harold's letter. That old thermos Caleb loved. And one more thing. The scarf he gave me at 14 with his allowance money. I never wore it, too bright for my taste. But mercy. I wanted him to see I'd kept it. Because healing isn't always loud, my dear. Sometimes it's the quiet click of a pen on paper. The warmth of a second chance stirring like morning light through lace curtains. And the slow, steady climb back to something that almost broke but didn't. October came dressed in gold and fire. The leaves along the blue ridge curled in shades of rust and honey, their edges crisp like parchment waiting to be turned. I packed light. Just enough to remind myself this trip wasn't about tending to others. It was about presence. Mine. Caleb picked me up early that Saturday morning. He got out of the truck before I even reached the porch. Took my suitcase like it was made of glass. You look nice, he said, adjusting his ball cap. Like someone who belongs on a postcard. I smiled, tugged my cardigan closer. And you look like a boy trying to make things right. He laughed softly. That obvious, huh? We drove in companionable silence. The kind that settles between 2 people who don't need to fill space to feel connected. The road curled through mountains like ribbon through a child's hand. The cabin was simple, wood-paneled, warm, with a porch swing overlooking the valley. No screens. No schedules. Just time. And oh my dear. How we used it. We hiked slow and steady. He pointed out birds the way he used to when he was little. I told him stories he hadn't heard in years. About his daddy's laugh. The time I nearly burned down the kitchen learning to make Harold's favorite biscuits. One night, we sat by the fire, sipping tea in mismatched mugs. He stared into the flames and whispered, "I was afraid if I stood up for you, I'd lose something." I reached over, laid my hand on his. "And what did you lose instead?" He looked at me. Really looked. "You." We didn't cry. Not then. The fire did enough flickering for both of us. But I saw it in his eyes, the child in him, still hoping he hadn't broken the most sacred bond. And I let him know in the quiet that followed he hadn't. The next morning, we took a photo on the porch, just the two of us. Sun on our faces, peace in our hearts. He posted it later with a caption that said simply, "Right where I should have been all along." And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not as an obligation, not as an extra seat, but as his mother. Whole, honored, loved. We came home lighter. Not in luggage, but in weight, the kind that presses on a soul when words go unspoken too long. Caleb walked me to my door like he used to when he was a boy coming back from school. Slower, softer. "I'm not going to let it happen again," he said, hands in his pockets. "The distance. The silence. You matter, Mama. And not just when it's convenient." I touched his cheek, thumb brushing the line that Harold once said would deepen with fatherhood. "It's not about grand gestures, Caleb. Just show up. That's all I ever wanted." He nodded, and for once, it wasn't a promise made out of guilt, but intention. The next Sunday, I returned to church. Not in the back row, but to my old spot, second pew left side. And when the congregation began to hum the first notes of "It Is Well," I felt it in my chest. Not just the music, but something close to wholeness. After service, Aubrey approached. She had the baby on her hip, and something softer in her eyes. "I'd like to try again," she said. "If you'll let me." I paused. Let the moment breathe. "I'll walk with you," I said. "As far as you're willing to walk beside me." She nodded, swallowing whatever pride she'd brought with her. That was enough. Over the weeks that followed, we stitched together a new kind of rhythm. Not perfect, but real. Aubrey invited me to help with the baby's birthday cake. Not store-bought this time, but something we baked together in her kitchen. Flour in our hair and a little laughter between cautious glances. Darlene stayed back. Whether by choice or quiet suggestion, I didn't know. And didn't need to. Because this moment, this messy, mending, marvelous moment belonged to us. I started hosting Sunday suppers again. Caleb helped set the table. Aubrey brought the pie. The baby, now walking, toddled between us like a bridge we'd all forgotten how much we needed. And when he reached for my lap with frosting still on his cheeks, I felt it deep. Not just the warmth of his little hands, but the seed of something we'd nearly lost. Belonging. Not because I demanded it, but because they chose it. The cabin photo now sits framed on my mantle. Caleb in flannel, me in my soft straw hat, the mountains holding us like a blessing we almost missed. Sometimes I still think about that first trip, the one I didn't take. The porch I never sat on. The fire pit where my seat went cold. But now I understand. Some absences are necessary for truths to rise. I no longer chase invitations. I no longer twist myself into shapes to be palatable. Instead, I show up in fullness, no apologies, no smallness. Caleb does too. More often now. We don't always talk about the silence that was, but we live in the sound that came after. The laughter around my Sunday table, the clink of teacups, the tiny voice of my grandson calling me Mimi, like it was stitched into his soul. And Aubrey? She still brings store-bought pie some weeks. But she also brings stories. Little kindnesses. Patience. We are not what we were, but we are building what we never had. And mercy me. That's something worth holding on to. My dear, if I paid for everything. Then my son's mother-in-law took my place on the trip, echoed anything inside your own story. I hope you know this. Being overlooked does not mean you are unworthy. Sometimes, the deepest love must be withheld to be felt. Sometimes, your absence is the only way others learn what your presence truly meant. Leave me a note below. Tell me where this story met you. And if someone you know has ever felt invisible in the life they helped build, pass this along. Subscribe, sweetheart. There are more stories waiting. And until we meet again, remember, you are not forgotten. You never were.